This week on Buffering, we are excited to be joined by Alyene Schneidewind, the Chief Performance Officer at Logic Monitor. And prior to joining Logic Monitor, Alyene held leadership positions at Salesforce, where she worked with some of our actual current colleagues. And first off, Alyene, well, welcome. And I have to say, just an absolutely amazing title. I'm always jealous of a great job title. And Chief Performance Officer is a pretty spectacular one.
Well, thank you. I agree. It's definitely a one of a kind. In fact, our CEO and I made it up to kind of give the right context of the work to be done. But the origin is she's our CEO is a former college athlete and grew up always orienting around performance. And as she stepped into the CEO role, she really was very committed to creating a culture of high performance. So that's the title. I wear it with pride, and certainly any conference I go to, people are like, what is this? What is this role you have?
How do I get this
Yeah,
role?
exactly.
That sounds fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Well, would you mind giving us just kind of like a brief introduction on some of your history? And, I mentioned that you worked with some of our colleagues while you were at Salesforce, but I'd love to get a little bit more of a view on what your current role is as Chief Performance Officer, and then we can really dive into the conversation today.
Yeah, happy to. So, at the heart of it, to have a performance culture, it really is about being clear about, the goals of the company, and then how do you unlock and accelerate, the success. So in the role, I lead a lot of the transformation functions. So I'm currently leading our AI transformation as a company. I also lead strategic partnerships, which are relationships we have with companies like OpenAI and AWS and more to come. We see those extensions of Logic Monitor as growth levers, for our future. I also lead functions like training, certification, and the customer community, because for us, unlocking that group with knowledge and empowering them to be our advocates in our accounts and in the ecosystem, it's again a huge growth lever and unlock for the company. And then I also, on the other side of the house, I lead the HR functions as well. And again, anything we'll talk about as it relates to performance or transformation, it always comes back to the people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we dive too deep into our conversation today, one thing that people may not know is you actually worked with some of our colleagues here at Calix in a past life, including John, who introduced us, Martha, and Michael himself. So Gabe and I were talking a little bit, and we were really hoping you could share with us your best John, Michael, and Martha story too.
Wow, we'll just kick it off with the tea. I would just say, let's see. I think as it relates to Michael, who was an incredible leader at Salesforce. When Michael and I first met, we had asked him to move as an expat to Japan and help us unlock the Japanese market in our customer success division. And so I will just say, I felt like I was, culturally assimilating with Michael, many late night phone calls. I bet if I asked my family, they could also probably have reference points on where Michael was living and how he was, getting settled into his new life. But I really loved working with him, and he's an incredible leader. And then as it relates to John and Martha, we were in the customer success organization, really at the front end of scale and growth at Salesforce. So we had like a mantra every year: what got us here is not going to get us to the next place, because every year we just massively expanded our customer footprint, and any models or org structures or approaches we had to cover customers broke. And so every year we were constantly reimagining. So I would just say my fondest memories of John and Martha, are probably sitting in rooms where we're being handed some like crazy problem, or we broke some part of the customer experience or the customer journey, and we had to reimagine together as a team. And I think in order to do that well, you just also really have to have like depth in relationship as a team. And so I'm very proud and grateful of those years that we spent together.
That sounds amazing. And kind of going back to our topic now, one of the things we wanted to talk about today was driving transformation and creating that high performance culture as well. So can you talk to us a little bit about high performance and how you would define that?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about high performance, I'm a big sports fan, so I always, think of these sports analogies. But if you think of any of these like award-winning teams out there, and you think of the attributes that they had, oftentimes it started with the culture of the team. And I admire again many coaches of the current and the past. But when you have a great coach that's clear about the culture that they want to create, they show up every day as a leader, holding people accountable to values and expectations, I think that gives the container to have success. And then when you get it right, it's also about then creating a team of people who bring different things to the table. Again, if it's a sports team, they all have these different superpowers or strengths, yet they're all clear about their role, and get really committed to being an expert at their role. But also a team approach is like you've got each other's back. So when something doesn't go as according to plan, like everyone's ready to jump in and help each other out. And another attribute that I think about is the best athletes train they hold themselves personally accountable. I'd say the best athletes probably practice the most and even practice outside of practice. And so really, as we think about a business, it's like finding people that orient that way. And then also I think giving and receiving feedback, like that's a huge part of it too. Like we're all on a quest to get better every day, and in order to get better every day, we have to constantly be thinking about how am I doing, and how it relates to the system. So that's, I'd say, how we approach the performance culture. And then there's then the business elements of it. Again, I could go to how we operate at Logic Monitor, just making sure we're really clear about people's roles and their metrics of success and the expectations we have of them in the company. And then tying again, recognition and rewards and incentives. We have a pay for performance culture. So it really translates everywhere from the strategy all the way down to the, daily operations.
Listening to you talk about that, Alyene, I think and knowing your history with John and Martha, I can like see so much of their conversations with us over the years in these conversations too. You were talking about that, breaking things and trying to always continue to be better. We and I believe this was stolen from Salesforce, better, never best. Mm-hmm. Martha brought that mentality here of wanting to make sure that we're constantly on this journey of improvement. It's not a, hey, we got here and now we can just sit back and hang out. And the other part that she brought to this was, if you're not measuring it, it's just a hobby. And what you just said there around the metrics piece of this becomes really important too. And giving people guidance around the why of a specific metric becomes so critical for helping them understand why they need to be performing better or to get to that high performance level as well.
Yeah, agreed.
I love that. One of the other things that really jumped out to us as we were kind of researching and looking into your background, looking at Logic Monitor, going through this whole research for this conversation was the leader page at Logic Monitor. So I went to the page just to kind of see who else was there, and it was interesting because I would be the minority on that leadership page. Like there's a lot of diversity on that page. 6 of 8 of the leaders on your page are women, 3 or 8 were minorities. And, I don't think we need to, go into the political components of this, but I did just think it was really interesting having that diverse leadership group and diversity of thought, I would imagine, has a tremendous benefit to the organization. Could you talk a little bit about, how you've been able to create this leadership culture and then what that's meant to the organization overall as you guys have grown?
Yeah, thanks for noticing and for asking the question. One thing that I would say, our CEO, Christina Kosmowski, she's very intentional as she thinks about building leadership teams. And it's a big conversation that we're having as a team at all times. Again, I think it does go back. She also worked at Salesforce and then went on to Slack and then Logic Monitor. But, if in reflection in your career, the moments where teams were winning and having great success, it really did come back to the people that, you had in the mix. And then on the other side of it, the times where there were struggles or things weren't happening, I think the first place you could look is like, did we have the right people? And as it relates to people, I do also think like there's people for certain times and chapters of a company. And so again, just being really in tune with that. But I would just say it's a very intentionally built leadership team. And to your point, it's not just, diversity in what you're seeing on the website, but it really is, people who are bringing different experiences. We're all operating executives. We've all achieved great things in our career. And together, we're doing something really big at Logic Monitor. So I'll just say I love working in this team and in a culture like this, and it sets the tone, for the rest of the company.
It's so wonderful when you can find that group of people that you really, get along with, right? And so I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier too. I forgot to bring this up when you were talking about it. And it sort of speaks to the diversity of this too. It's not just hiring a bunch of the same people that are thinking the same way. I think, if you think about good leaders versus bad leaders, a bad leader is going to hire somebody who thinks and acts exactly like they do because they don't want to be challenged. A good leader is going to think about, how can I bring other people into this conversation that are going to provide me with different ideas that I haven't thought about before? And they're not threatened by that. That to me is the big component of this too. I'm sure we've all worked for wonderful leaders, and I know we've all worked for bad leaders as well. And the ones that we've probably struggled with are the ones where they don't want to hear your thoughts on things because they're threatened by what it is that you're bringing to the table. And it's hard to find that balance though, and figure that out. Hiring's so hard and building a team is so hard.
Yeah. And I think that's just a really important thing to call out. And, for me, I've worked in tech for 30 years. I feel like the ground in which I have always stood on, it's like always shifting and changing. And, now big things are happening in technology. So no one person is ever going to have all the answers or know how to do everything. And to your point, confident leaders want to surround themselves with highly competent people that bring expertise that they don't have. I mean, that's when, again, that magic and that goodness can happen from a leadership perspective. So totally agree with that point.
That's a much better word, confident versus unconfident. I say good and bad. I was sort of negative there, but confident is a great way to describe it.
Yeah. Well, shifting focus a little bit here, I want to talk about everyone's favorite subject, which is, of course, strategic priorities. And at Salesforce, we had the V2 MOM, which is the vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measures. This is really the framework we use to create that strategic plan. But what frameworks have you used in the past to create that structure for strategic planning?
Yeah, well, I grew up, at Salesforce. A very formative part of my career was at Salesforce. So I will just say, and I had a whole career before Salesforce, but I have never seen a company align the entire global organization so precisely outside of this process that Salesforce calls the V2 MOM. We have taken a version of it here as well. But I would say it for me really is the best practice. I mean, giving everyone clarity of the long-term vision and where you're trying to go, that North Star, and being able to always back into is the work we're doing going to get us to where we're trying to go? I mean, that's like the first most important thing. The second part of it is just being really clear about the values that we're all going to use to make decisions, to hire new people, to run the company. And I think sometimes values can be, people think of them as these posters up in the lobby, but to really operationalize values and live values in a real way. I haven't, again, never experienced it in the way that I did at Salesforce. And so, yes, we've brought that best practice as well. And then the next part of it is really what are the methods, which is what is the work to be done this year? So it's sort of like, and you've probably heard this phrase from your leaders as well, if it's not in the V2 MOM, or we call it the V2 M2, then it doesn't exist. But, as you're trying to transform and move a company toward the North Star, you have to be really, really clear about the work to be done. And a lot of debate goes into the actual words and goes into the prioritization. But if you can have that clarity at the highest level, and then a process to operationalize it and bring it down to every employee, and have everyone really clear about, the job that they do and how they're helping the company move forward. That's how you make progress. That's how you make impact. And then I love, Martha calling out the metrics, but it's true. If it's great to do all this work, but then how will you know you were successful? How do you measure it? So you do have to be really clear about metrics. And sometimes when you're doing something new, it could even be more of a milestone metric. Let's get this thing out the door in the first half. But when you're getting into the flywheel of operations, you really have to know, what are the numbers we're really trying to achieve? And how do we think about things are trending red, yellow, green? And another phrase we all grew up with was an early warning or a red flare or flag is the new green, because the sooner you can flag something that's off track, the more time you have to get it back on track. So again, that discipline, I think, is phenomenal, and certainly a best practice that Mark Benioff brought to the market. And I know so many companies emulate it, and it's something that we use. Yeah, it's incredible.
We do a very similar thing here where, it's starting off with that V2 mom process and then getting into what we would define as strategic priorities, and making sure that those strategic priorities are succinct. So, you can't do 100 things. So you have to be, I think that's the other part of this, is being really ruthless about what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And another part that you mentioned there, which I think is so important, and this came up I was at a conference, oh gosh, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, the weeks are running together, but we were talking about why, and really getting people to buy into the why of and what it means for them. So you've got this big grandiose plan as an organization. Well, what does it mean for Zach? What does it mean for Gabe? And how can I contribute to those things? And you touched on that. I'd love to hear just a little bit more of your perspective on, how do you get that down to sort of that entire organization, right? Of really making sure that everybody is aligned and working to that same goal.
Yeah, and it's super important. And I mean, it even goes back to the earlier point on a performance culture. Like if you have a performance culture and you're hiring these A players, everyone wants to be clear on like what it is that they are owning for the year and how they're going to be measured on their success. If you're clear about that, then again, they're motivated to go, do the work and do it well. I think there's another component here though, to there's a nuance here, which is there's the V2 mom is, really like the transformational strategy for the company and how do we get to where we're going. There's another component as it relates to like the frontline individual contributor, which is there is a day job. So it's different than the roles and responsibilities. And so I think one piece of advice for people trying to roll this out would be really clear about roles and responsibilities, and just make sure that, on the ground, that people understand why their job exists and what they own for the company or for the department. And then you layer on the V2M2, which is, again, if the company is going in this direction, any role in the company has a part of it that they need to contribute in order to achieve it. So we're leading a lot of things related to AI transformation right now. We have an AI product in market. I lead the people teams. I lead the recruiting team. My team is super clear about the role that they play to get us the best AI talent right now. We're changing our interview processes. Like we're doing our own work internally in an HR department so that we can accelerate the sale of our AI product out in market and transform our customer experience. So again, the way to do it is starting at the top, and then really having each leader, each department own it, bring it down, and then also putting an operating rhythm around it, just making sure there's some rhythm of checking in on it. As a manager, that can be the weekly one-on-one, certainly quarterly, I think, pull it out and just have an honest conversation about, how the team's tracking. But yeah, all of that keeps everyone aligned. And then you also kind of hit on this, when it's easy as you get going, lots of work can come down from a lot of good conversations that are happening. It helps you then go back to ruthless prioritization. It helps you go back to debate it. Okay, maybe something new did emerge, that you didn't think about at the beginning of the year. Then it gives you a framework to have a constructive debate about what do we stop doing so we can really focus over here. It's just an incredible tool.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, no, we've definitely seen that internally here at Calix as we've, kind of stolen more people from Salesforce and had this structure. But I think all the time about, how can we continue to have this conversation with our customers, because broadband service provider space is really going through a big transformation right now. And so the metrics, the measures, the people that are doing these jobs, it does need to change in many of these organizations. And it sometimes seems daunting and makes it so, sometimes it's just easier to kind of throw up your hands and go, well, let me just let the world happen around me versus, tackling some of this stuff head on, because it is a lot of work. But the good part is at the end of the day, when you can see that transformation happening, it's really, really worthwhile as an organization.
Yes.
So I know Zach is going to be mad at me for stealing this question and topic because he loves AI more than more than maybe anybody that I know. But we've got to
Whoa, don't
discuss
don't
AI.
don't make me sound like an AI stan over here, Gabe. I'm just your average AI user.
Hey, you have your what is it, your action button on your phone mapped to ChatGPT. So come on, dude, you can't. You're an AI bro. I'm sorry.
I mean, I should say I'm not the average AI user, but as I told you, Gabe, this week I've been exclusively using AI search instead of Google search. So more to come on that in a future episode, Gabe. But let's talk about AI a little bit. I'll let you have
Yes,
this one.
I do love me some AI search. It has been working. I've basically been exclusively on that for a while now too. Anyway, so as it relates to actual kind of business impact here, I know at Logic Monitor, really AI first company. We've seen some recent announcements from folks like Shopify, Duolingo, and others stating that if that basically new headcount won't be approved unless a hiring leader can show that AI can't do that work. And I thought that was really interesting as we're sort of seeing this shift with what's happening with some of these large organizations. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, Alyene, around, what your approach is to AI, how your organization is using it to drive change and create that high performance culture.
Yeah, I love this question too. I mean,
I feel like we can
everything
talk about
is,
this all day.
yes, everything is changing, and the reality is, the winners that will emerge from this time are the companies that are really leaning in, are the people that are really leaning in. I personally, it's totally changing my life. I'm a parent. It's changing my kid's life. Like it's truly incredible, and this generation will like barely remember a day when we didn't have AI,
I
by our.
think about that all the time because my kids are 9 and 5, and there's this, like, not to call out Zach here, but Zach's like smartphone generation. He doesn't remember a world primarily without smartphones. Yeah, I don't know how old your children are, but my kids won't remember a world without AI. Like, that's super wild to me, and I keep debating. I'd be curious to hear your perspective on this. Like, at what age should I be introducing them to this technology? Because I don't want them to be behind. Like, a 5-year-old probably can't understand it. 9-year-old, maybe he can start to wrap his mind around it a little bit. Anyway, it just trips me out thinking about this.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't have kids that age, so I haven't like spent a lot of time thinking about it. But I would just say everyone of any age should be thinking about AI use cases, and I think there can be, yeah, more recreational use cases. But I can, like, my kids are high school and college age, and there's incredible benefits of using AI not to write your papers, but to process complex topics. I have a daughter who has dyslexia and ADHD, and she's able to take notes from a class, throw it into her AI tool, and turn it into a podcast to help her study for an exam. And so it's incredible, and
Mhm.
it's so I would just say everyone needs to lean in. And I love the provocative nature of some of the companies we're seeing out there that are just like, pumping the brakes on just. And it's, for me, it's not about like stopping hiring, but it's the question that makes you pause and think, like, should I be like thinking differently about the workflow of that job, or how we get to these results, or the goal of the job again that we're talking about.
Mhm.
So for me, again, leading this at Logic Monitor, this is a massive change effort, and I would
Yeah.
say, for me, there's this two-prong approach. There has to be the bottoms up. How do you unlock and democratize AI for all employees? How do you train them, get them excited? How do you let their natural creativity and innovation flow from the ground up? For us, we announced a partnership with OpenAI earlier this year. We have an AI product in market, and part of the partnership is related to how we can accelerate success with customers. But the other part of the partnership is, how do we completely modernize how we're working at Logic Monitor? And so, yeah, we've rolled it out. We have incredible adoption, incredible satisfaction. I would say our employees see it as our investment in them and their future. And,
Mhm.
again, we are going to get business results and performance out of it. And there's just a lot of creativity happening too. The employees have created over 200 custom GPTs in the first 90 days, because this is just an amazing tool to get our jobs done. So a lot of the use cases are automating, sort of workflows, or using it to take on those more detail-oriented tasks that could take an individual many hours or days, to complete their work. But yeah, as I think about it, then there's also this top-down approach, which is like, what is our strategy to accelerate like our performance in the market? So it is about thinking of those core use cases in core departments where we can, in my mind, you have to deconstruct core jobs and reconstruct them. And moving forward, there'll be the digital skills of the job and the human skills of the job. And once you have that clarity, I do think it will start to make you think different about hiring. It will make you look for different skills even maybe than you were hiring for in the past. But it's also not lost on me that for some people, this can feel really scary because they haven't done it before, or maybe they're worried, that it will, I don't know, erode the security of their jobs. And I would just encourage, in life, I think you can operate from fear or you can operate from a position of power. And I would just really encourage everyone to flip the script on that. It's more just like, how can I use it to be more successful and augment, again, the work that I'm responsible for? And then more you lean in and learn, you can also start to pave the way as a champion within your company or with your customers.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I look at somebody like Zach, and not to suck up to Zach here, but like, he's done a phenomenal job. You're talking about building, custom GPTs and things like that. He's been doing a lot of work around custom agents. We use Copilot internally, and there's so much that can be done there around just like you said, automating a lot of these tasks. The research component of this has been huge for me.
Incredible.
I have found it so beneficial, where I'd have to be reading through pages of documents before and trying to find these key little nuggets to pull out. And it really has made a huge difference for me from that perspective. It goes to, so Zach and I were having a conversation with our chairman actually earlier today. We're getting him on the podcast, so that'll be a fun episode. But he was we were talking about AI a little bit, and this transformation that's happening, just in the world and inside of Calix and our business. But he was talking about, where people are going to succeed going forward. And he used two words. And Zach, the first one was intimacy, and I'm forgetting the second one. What was the second one?
Oh man, Gabe, now you're gonna make me forget. It was
I think
intimacy,
it was like innovation or something,
and
like that, or something similar to that. But his point was, what are the things that are not going to be done by AI? And his point about intimacy was the conversation that's happening with a customer. So I think that's one of I in my role here at Calix, I get to talk to customers all the time. That's how I spend most of my day. And that's a hard thing to replicate with AI, that intimate conversation. And then the insight that I'm able to bring back from those conversations to hopefully share broadly across not only the organization, but also with other customers that I'm talking to. That's a really hard thing to replicate with AI. And so if I think about, what are the roles that are going to be really successful in the future? People who are customer facing, who have those intimate conversations with customers about the impacts of whatever product or service or thing that you're selling is having an impact on their business. That's a really good place to be. And I would certainly encourage people to think about that from a career kind of trajectory perspective. But then you touched on this too, Alyene. It's how do you use these tools to innovate? And whether that may just be almost like micro innovation in your own role. And that's great. But if you can be, so much more efficient in your own role by leveraging these tools, that could be a massive step forward for the organization. And then you can start to distribute that out across the org as well.
And that was your second I gave initiative.
Initiative, that's what it was. Damn it.
But that's a sneak peek to come on a future episode. Yes. So now we have to keep people coming back for the rest of that conversation.
Yeah. I did want to ask Alyene, just, you mentioned you've rolled this out across your organization. You're getting people excited about it and you have really good adoption. How have you been able to drive that adoption? Is it just people are, is it the type of people that you're hiring are genuinely excited to use these tools? There's probably some of that, but I do imagine there's some, I hate to call them like laggards, but for lack of a better term, or those people who are a little bit nervous about it. How have you been able to encourage them to start to leverage these tools?
Yeah, well, I authentically think the reason we're seeing such incredible adoption is that people are like minds blown. It's helping them. Like it's just making our jobs better, easier. You know, I was in a strategic partnerships brainstorm the other day, and when you have your agent sitting by your side and you can ask quick questions, hey, who does this company partner with, and what does that relationship look like, and what would the competitive landscape look like, and to have those like expert real-time data in the meeting with you by your side. I mean, it really, it's incredibly game changing. So authentically, I think the great adoption we're seeing is because people are like, this is amazing. But we've also put, again, intention around how we're driving change management and communications. We have Slack channels. I think our top Slack channels in the company is called company announcements, where you hear from our CEO and other executives. But the second top Slack channel in the company is our chat GPT collab. And that's where like anyone in the company can be like, oh, hey, I used this use case, to your point on deep research. And as they come out with new models, like, you know, there are people like, there was a finance person who pulls a report together for the CFO every month on like market data. And he's like, I built a custom GPT and now this thing cranks it out for me in 45 minutes. And he used to spend a couple days doing all this research. And that custom GPT can be applicable to the competitive intelligence team who has to also roll out, reports like that. So yeah, we're really trying to make sure we are showcasing innovation. Any employee can do that. We also recognize core use cases. Like we had an inside sales BDR create one called Sales Mantra, and it was just like his quick just-in-time prep before getting on a call with the customer to pull information from sources. And then, by putting a spotlight on it, you can then get the entire sales organization to start using this, or customer success. And so, yeah, I think part of our adoption is because we're being really thoughtful about the change management communication. You could go further. It's a great recognition tool. We've got leaderboards, certainly. And then for people where we don't have, where we maybe have some of the people who haven't adopted, I mean, you can also take a look at that and go in and try to give them a nudge. But I think another key there is like training. So we also make the training available for employees. But I think, again, once you start using it, it's incredible.
Yeah, we've certainly seen that. We have a few folks within our organization. You mentioned the podcast thing earlier, that your daughter took her notes and created that. We've had some folks do that internally with research projects, things like that. Zach, I was a little nervous because I think it was Pete who created that podcast that was like just created out of AI. And I'm like, oh crap, are Zach and I going to be out of a podcast job here pretty soon with you can just throw some stuff into a podcast tool and it creates it for you. It's pretty cool. But I think about how people learn. Some people learn better through reading. Some people learn better through, audio or podcasts. Some people learn better through video. If we can create these different modes for them to engage and leverage the content that exists, that's a huge win, because then we're just distributing that, even more broadly.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, thank you, Alyene, for joining us on the podcast today. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Buffering. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with Gabe, Alyene, and I on LinkedIn.